Hey everyone, this is smpratte, and today we're going to do another market discussion. We're going to talk about why is first edition base stonking so hard right now. In the past month or so, first edition base has increased in general, but there are definitely certain cards that had a more dramatic uptick. And I just want to have a discussion with you guys about that. I think there's some relevant points that I even missed myself. For a long time, I made videos about it a few years ago that I'll bring back in this conversation for why this is happening, why first edition base is doing what it's doing right now. I think a good starting point is going to be that smpratism. Where's the cheaper option? I mean, seriously, where's the cheaper option? Asking for a friend because it just isn't there. If we start with sealed product, it's pretty obvious for most people. First edition base has always been extremely optimized from the beginning. If we go back to 1999, you couldn't buy first edition base set by the pallet. You couldn't do what you do today. Any business, even someone like me, the sperm of the sperm whale can buy from a distributor a pallet of evolutions or whatever new set that comes out. You couldn't do that first edition base. If you talk to Gary and the guys who are still around, the vintage collectors who are still around today, who were around back then, you had to drive to different states to pick up a box or a case if you were lucky. I'm not exaggerating. Like, if you got a case of first edition base back in the day, that was it. Like, you did it. Like, you did as much as you could. Like, that is the final level of what you could acquire because it was so different than new sets today. So therefore, from the beginning, first edition base sealed has always been allocated, much more allocated than even a lot of the other WotC sets that came after. Today, the prices for first edition base are usually record breaking. If we go look at box breaks, that's probably the best example of this. Each box break usually has a new record price point, not only for the box, but the packs themselves. And then we got to plug in our generator, turn on the lab, fire up the lab equipment, and, go through and do our science experiment. And it's ultra optimized, ultra scrutinized. Like, we understand every little step of the way. They're always weighed. You get 2 light packs with a heavy pack. Everything is broken down because that availability just isn't there. I can't just open up first edition base packs every week, every month. I'd be out of them very quickly. Everybody would. Even the largest holder of first edition base is insignificant because it just never was a thing. It was never out there in large quantities. So therefore, that's ultra optimized. There's no angle that's missing with first edition base sealed product. Now, if we move to the other side of that, what's in the actual sealed product, the cards themselves, where is that cheaper ungraded mint option? Again, asking for a friend because I'm always buying, and it really just doesn't exist. Like, if you find an ungraded mint first edition base card, I'm not even talking hollow. We could do, let's give Caterpie some love. Even a Caterpie, a Growlithe, even stuff like this. If you find that mint ungraded, you hit a home run. You got a Mike Trout batting average. If you find that stuff actually mint condition ungraded, that's a very rare scenario. More specifically, a lot of the ungraded stuff is typically higher than some of the mid-range grades out there. And that's because when businesses get this stuff in stock, they're like, whoa, a first edition base hollow? That's probably their exact reaction. Whoa, this is a first edition base hollow. So they're going to treat it that way. They're going to put it at a higher price because they can't just get a ton of this stuff. So point being, there is no real cheaper option. If there is, it's never consistent. Again, if you find that ungraded mint anything at this point, like gust of wind, more power to you. That's like a home run scenario. And it feels good because of that, because it is so hard to do. So at the end of the day, there is no huge unoptimized thing here. First edition base is by far the most optimized set ever in Pokemon. And this takes us into the more opinionated, emotional observation analysis of first edition base. I think another important point here is something that I missed personally. In a video I did years ago that some of the guys at hockey found out about and were like, whoa, this Scotty's crazy here, spending $20,000 at the time on first edition base set. I remember making that in a video. That month I spent 20 grand on first edition base only. And most of it was non-hollow. Most of it was graded non-hollow, some ungraded non-hollow cards. And why I made that video is to hint at, I think what a lot of people miss, myself included, the non-hollow cards are also in the packs. Get ready, guys. Big brain galaxy meme right here. The non-hollow cards are also in the packs. So what I mean by this is we get blinded by the light sometimes. Some people only see the hollow cards. We stare into the background of that beautiful Chansey hollow. We miss the cards behind it. And when you really take a deep dive into the availability of sealed product, it's so scarce and unavailable that I think people miss that the common and uncommon cards are kind of a misnomer. And when you really break down the math, especially for uncommons, yes, there's 3 of them in a pack, but they're also from a larger pull pool. And you really got to go through and understand that math. Because when you have a certain amount of sealed product available that is limited, that means all of the cards are limited. I think probably the easiest example is the rare non-holos. Like if you bought, let's say, what is a light pack now, like 2K, right around there. You go buy a light pack of like $2,000, open it up, you get lucky if you get last. Pokemon breeder, trader, item finder, deadly spray, whatever it is, pick your poison. Whatever pull you get, that's one. That's all you get. You only get one rare slot. So you got to hope that it's a 10 or a high grade. But that's all it is. That's it. From that pack that is really hard to find, it's just those cards are in there. And a lot of people, myself included, wholesale missed what common and uncommon means in a context. A common first edition base card is like a rare, like modern rare, if that makes sense. Like I think a modern rare card today is in a similar place for a lot of these common, uncommon first edition base cards. Not only in mint availability, but just at large. Like I don't think it's really understood, even for me back in the day when I was like, why would I want to buy a common card, in the mid 2000s? I could have bought that purchase I made at 20 grand for like a zero less if I bought it in like 2007. I just didn't, because I didn't see that value yet. I didn't have the foresight that far ahead to see that potential there. More specifically, first edition base is going to be the biggest set for Pokemon, bar none. I mean, the proof is in the pudding with the price, but more specifically, first is first. There's no way to change that. What I mean is, first edition base is alpha of Pokemon. It's 86 Fleer, it's 79 OPG, it's 52 tops. It's the first set. Even if you're like a Goy Zoomer from Discord and you weren't born or alive when first edition base came out, so you don't really care about it, that doesn't matter because it's always going to be the first set. There's no way to change that. And that has this intangible value that other WotC sets won't have. There's no way to replicate that. It's an intangible thing that's always going to be a part of first edition base. More specifically, it's the most comprehensive set out there. Like if you go to the Pop Report, there's no set that has been consistently graded from the jump to today like first edition base. Nothing comes close. Maybe some of this modern stuff down the road, because we had people actively grading from the beginning all the way through, you'll start to see a similar, like, I guess, overview of like how comprehensive it is. But first edition base, nothing comes close from 1999 until today. It has been consistently graded because of these elements that it has this historical value. It's the first set. To really drive that point home, I think for a lot of serious collectors who tune into my like niche and a niche channel, sometimes we got to take a step back. Like I try to do this for myself, where I try to take a step back and, get away from like all the little nuance of like talking to other serious collectors all the time and get in that mindset of someone who's new to the hobby, a cross collector from another hobby. What are they probably going to go for? It's easy to understand this is the first Squirtle, Pikachu, Charmander, Bulbasaur. Starters are a very easy thing to understand. It's easy to understand these are their rookie cards, like base set Charizard, very iconic, the most popular card. This is what people are going to gravitate towards who aren't in Pokemon like full on, who don't live like in a grandma basement, who don't talk to you in their like super nerd shirts. Those cross collectors are going to dive into first edition base most likely more than any other set. So again, not only does it have this historical value, it's got the largest buyer pool. Not only, I would say, quantity, but depth as well. Like, think about the guys who are going to cross over in first edition base. It's usually going to be deep pockets. You get a little sample size of that publicly on E4. You see these older guys, vintage collectors coming in. And older in Pokemon is funny because it's like, they're just like late 30s, 40s, not really old at all. But they're coming in with higher capital, more rolling capital, higher spending power, just naturally because they're older. They've been working longer. And therefore, they come in for what? First edition base. So not only quantity, but depth as well. You have so many bigger buyers coming in for first edition base than you would, say, Team Rocket. Not trying to throw shade on Team Rocket, even though there's plenty of it with the Dark Pokemon. But at the end of the day, more people are definitely buying first edition base who are new to the hobby than they are, any other WotC set or any set in general. So that's another big factor that I think is always a part of the identity first edition base. If we really want to get in here and like talk about like, the starters, because people are like, oh, it's Gary V, hyping it up, all these things, which I don't doubt that's some micro reason. Yeah, I don't doubt that has a short-term influence. But at the end of the day, starters are their own category. They always have been. Before Gary V was doing Pokemon or trading cards, starters have always been their own category. I've consistently bought and sold those for years. Because they've always been their own thing. I mean, even for me, like when I see base set Pikachu, I'm like, that's base set Pikachu. Like when I see my boy Squirtle here, Squirtle's getting the front row while Charmander's going in the back. Squirtle has always been, this is Squirtle. This is the first Squirtle. It's always going to be that way. Again, first is first. Even for the series collectors, I think they understand, like, starters are their own thing. And I think that also takes us into, like, the analysis part of each card in first edition base, which I think a lot of other WotC sets don't have. So if we start in reverse order, like with modern sets, what do people do? What do they go for? The Charizard, right? The chase cards. The hyper rare, the whatever, the shiny card, whatever it is. The one that sparkles the most, that we're like bugs. We just fly right into the most sparkly, shiny thing in the set. With first edition base, pretty much every card has had an identity for a long time. Even if we go back like years, 2016, 15. If I start naming cards to you guys, you'll probably be like, oh yeah, that's the one that's hard to grade. Like War Turtle. Pain. War Turtle is like the hardest non-hollow card to grade. I don't know what is going on with War Turtle, maybe it's because in the back of the pack. I don't know what is going on with that card. It is so hard to grade. Jinx is another one that's pretty difficult. Porygon's kind of in there. Caterpie is one. People need to put some respect on the name for Caterpie. That is a hard common card to grade. No memes aside. Like all memes aside. It is actually a hard card to grade. Growlies is another one in there as well. You know, when you start going down the line, just go through Bubblepedia. Look at each card. People who've been around long enough, you start to get an impression from pretty much every single one. I remember Devu Spray was difficult for a while. Item Finder was kind of in the middle there. Last has always been a front runner for the trainers. I don't know why. You can't spell first edition base without that last. So that one has always been, you know, a front runner in value, availability, you know, put it all together. Point being, a lot of these cards have their own identity. Where if you go to other WotC sets, like even go to the next one, Jungle, most of those non-hollows, they're just like a blur. You know, while Humeno did a great job, beautiful artwork, the price and like identity is a blur. Where first edition base, again, you can go through pretty much every card, and each one is going to have a very pointed price point going back years and years and years. So again, talking about that comprehensive element with the pop report and things like that, it's not only for the data in the pop report, but also for the identity of the cards. Like, you know, starters are kind of their own subcategory. Again, some of these harder to grade cards like War Turtle, who's like best of both worlds. He's a starter and that he's such a pain to grade. War Turtle is such, I cannot stress enough. I probably have like at least 20 PSA 9 or 8 War Turtles. I thought, I'm like, okay, maybe this one will be the 10, maybe this one will be 10. No, all denied. So there are so many cards that have an identity, non-hollow cards. I'm not even talking about rares, like uncommon and common cards that have a fleshed out identity because, again, first edition base is its own animal. It's always going to be that way because this stuff has been here for a while. Inertia is a hell of a drug. Inertia is a very difficult thing to reverse. Very difficult to reverse inertia. I would say almost to impossible for a lot of factors. So I think that's the overall breakdown for, you know, the mixture of like analytics data and like more opinion observation there. The only other thing I really want to throw in here, I guess, kind of summarize everything that we've talked about, is that we're just highlighting again the people who are buying these cards and new buyers and new collectors. It's the easiest set to understand. It's just so easy to understand. You know, when people talk about Shadowless, like I will always love Shadowless. I think this is a good counterpoint to really hammer home why first edition base is so easy to understand, why it's head and shoulders above everything. I love Shadowless. Like, from a kid, like when I look at this card and I see the Shadowless border, the thin HP, it's like the American Psycho, like the raised letter, like the bone business card. It just does something for me. Even to this day, I'm like, oh my God, that's a Shadowless card. Like it could be $1 card and I'm like, wow, that's, you know, that's a Shadowless card that I'm looking at. To this day, I just have that same reaction because that was rare for me. You know, where I grew up, Unlimited was it. If you saw Shadowless, like that was like crazy. That was like the legendary Pokemon. First edition base was not even a thing. Didn't even exist in my area at all. Like you didn't see any of it. You saw the like tease Machamp with the stamp, but it was shadowed. Like that's all you saw. You didn't see any first edition base cards where I grew up. So Shadowless was like the thing. But why I'm referencing Shadowless is because if you're a new collector, you're coming into the hobby, that's an acquired taste. Like Shadowless is something that you either had to grow up with or to have some vocabulary or understanding of Pokemon to know what that means, because it's not really a well-known term. You know, if I go out in the street, I've said this before, and I ask, like, if I go to hockey, for example, I ask my friends, hey, what does Shadowless mean to you? They're going to be like, I hear the word you're saying, but my brain doesn't understand it. Or if I say, do you know what first edition means? Immediately, pretty much everyone's going to know that. They're like, oh yeah, like the first release? Yeah, they'll get that right away. You know, first edition is something that you'll see in artwork, books, other trading cards. Is a very ubiquitous term. Shadowless isn't as much. You know, again, I adore Shadowless, but I also acknowledge the reality of that people who are new to the hobby, it's very easy to understand first edition. It's super easy. It's like, oh, there's a stamp. It literally says edition 1. Like, it's super easy to understand. Again, the term first edition is easy to understand. When you tie that into it being the first set, it makes sense. Also, most people coming in, again, those vintage collectors who know what this is, who know where this is from, who recognize this exact image from the anime, they grew up with the Kanto era. Go look at the sales for the Kanto games. I mean, go look at the sales data for that stuff. Go look at the price for these games today. The proof's in the pudding. Most people who are buying this stuff grew up during the Kanto era. Those vintage collectors who are now in their 30s, 40s, that's what they know. They know the Kanto era. They don't know all the new Pokemon, the key Pokemon, the little sandcastle Pokemon. They don't know any of that stuff. They know the originals, more specifically the starters, and there's a lot of people who might just want the starters. You know, you got to remember, Charmander is the stage before Charizard. So like, if Charizard's going up, it makes sense that Charmander is going to follow it to some degree, because you know, some people want that evil, like the whole line of cards, like the full evolution. There's just a lot of that activity coming in right now. But I think those general points are relevant. I think those are the things to really like sink your teeth into. That's at least what I try to look at, because I think that's the most relevant data. That the people coming in today are the older audience. They grew up with the Kanto era. First edition makes a lot of sense for everybody. So I think that stuff is really relevant for why you're seeing this first edition base. It's why you saw it all this time. You know, this is nothing new. The only new thing is the price. This process and all these processes have always been happening to some degree. It's only the uptick in price, and I think perhaps like more of an exponential uptick because of all the variables right now in the world we're in. But at the end of the day, these processes have always been going on to some degree. It's just more of it, which is what the price reflects at the end of the day. So I don't really think it's anything new. It's just more of all this stuff we talked about happening today, which again, the price is just a representation of that. So there it is, guys. Hopefully that discussion, again, is something you enjoy. I try to really like balance the discussion videos with some of the openings. I know I can't please everybody, but some people like to see the cards. Some people like to hear me do the analysis. So I'm going to try to keep that balance going. But again, hopefully this is useful to you guys. You know the deal. Let me know how you feel. And that's pretty much it, guys. Till next time.